Hi, in this video, we're going to take a look at Redgate's Flyway solution. And this is going to cover both the development and the deployment workflows to show you how that you can bring standardization and repeatable processes to speed up and stabilize your entire workflow. So to begin with, we're just going to make a couple of changes. Now we're going to be using SQL Server for our demonstration today, but Flyway is one of our cross-platform solutions. So the same functionality that we're seeing end-to-end is available across SQL Server, Oracle, Postgres, and MySQL, with the deployment aspect also available for over 40 additional database platforms as well. So to begin with, I just want to make a couple of representative changes to a database. So one of these is going to be editing an existing object. So we're going to add a column into our customers table here. Save that. And I'm also going to use Redgate's SQL prompt solution to very quickly create a brand new stored procedure to represent an object addition. So SQL prompt has functionality for code snippets, allowing me to shortcut this process and build out my framework that I've customized on demand. So in here, let's just add in a very easy procedure to select from that customers table as well. So we now have two changes within our development environment, and we're going to want to deploy these to both our test and production environment going forwards. Whether this is just a single change or a multitude of changes from many developers is entirely up to you and fitting in with your workflow. But once we've made our changes, we now want to move outside of the development IDE to our Flyway solution. And I have an existing project based around my databases here. It's called our Westwind project. And when I've created this, this is a very simple process to do. I select my platform that I want to work with. So as I said, we can offer the same functionality across these four, but also additional functionality for all of these different platforms and both cloud and on-prem variations throughout as well. In here, we have a couple of folders to create. So our schema model folder, that's where we're going to track and capture all of our objects that are in our database and how they evolve. And our migrations folder is where we're going to focus towards our change scripts and our corresponding rollbacks. To create a new project, what I would simply do is give our project a name and pick a local destination that I want to save this into before committing into version control. But as I said, we actually have a Westwind project here. So when I select into that, this is already pre-configured for me with my development database connected and linked to those project files that we've created when we first set this up. And what we have down here is all Flyway connection points are done using JDBC connections. And this wizard here allows me to build out that connection point here. And we can see that my Westwind dev environment is selected. And this is going to compare against my schema model. And my schema model is where all of those objects are tracked for comparison. So in here, we can see the system has automatically, on the first run, created us separate subfolders for each object type. So if we go into tables, for example, we can see that customer table that I want to work with. And within here, there is a create statement for each object that every time I make that change, we're just going to be capturing the latest version of that in here. So as we can see, currently no Facebook column is actually visible in the version in the project. As such, when I actually come in here, both my customers table and my new procedure are being called out as a modify and create step. Now, we also have some other changes in here. Now, if we're working on a shared development environment, I'm going to see other people's changes. If I'm working on a dedicated environment, I'm only going to see my own. Either way, we can accommodate that workflow within Flyway. And if we had, for example, a large number of changes that we wanted to simply navigate through, we can use our search functionality at the top to really find the specific change I want to review. But in here, for example, and we use the customers table modification for review, when we click on the object itself, we're going to see the new version of the customers table. That's the one that I've updated in my development database. And over here, we've got the current version in the project. And when I scroll down, is just going to call out to me exactly what the change that we're being presented to save into the new state is going to include. In this case, it's my new Facebook column. Same for the new procedure. Over here, I've got brand new procedure that I've created. It doesn't exist in the project, so there is no comparison point, but Flyway will be able to add this in if we select it. And I can simply come through and select those objects in here that I want to work with. Additionally, for SQL and Oracle currently, we can control static data within our projects as well. So within here, this allows us to really choose locations where we want to capture the data that's in development and then have that change scripted out and persist through our further environments as well. To do this, I can merely come in here. I can then pick the tables that I want to actually track and select. And then I can actually alter these as well. So if I want to select, for example, the region table, I may actually just choose to control the region name into my script, in which case I could select down to a column level for where I want to actually start scripting that data. But on this occasion, I just want to move these schema changes through into the project. So I'm set on Save to Project, and I can merely update that local version of the object definition that I hold here. Flyway is going to do that, give me confirmation this is done. And when I come back into the schema model, we can now see that our customers table has a new pending change, not as of yet committed into version control. And I could do this as many times as I want. This could be a case of me making several changes before I wish to script this out, or merely doing this to combine with other people's changes before I generate them into the change script itself. But in this case, we're going to move through the process in quite a linear fashion. And we're going to move to generating our migration scripts. Now, our migration script is what we're going to actually use to make this change against our further stage environments. So deploying to test and deploying to production in our use case here. And this is going to move that comparison on slightly. So instead of comparing from development to schema model, the updated schema model is now the source of our changes. So we're looking for any change present in the schema model that isn't already in our migrations folder. And our migrations folder looks a little different to the schema model. When we first created the project, we looked at a production-like instance and created a baseline script. And that baseline script covers all of the objects in that environment and gives us the starting point for our database and our project. Every time we then choose to create a new change, we create a new versioned migration script. And these are numbered in sequence in line with your desired numbering system. So we simply have 1, 2, 3. You could have 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, whatever you want to adopt here. In addition, as I mentioned, we're also going to look at the corresponding rollbacks that we have here as well. So in this case, we have version 2 to take us forwards, and U002 to take us backwards. It'll be a direct rollback of that script. And what we're now looking at is what changes do we have in the schema model that we haven't got captured into a script? And in this case, the same changes will appear because we've selected those, captured them into our schema model, tracked the object creation or evolution. And then here we're getting the option to bring those in. So from here, I now want to generate these into a change script. And what this is going to do is in line with our options that we've set for the project, and this can include filtering objects out, this can include how we're actually going to structure our deployments themselves, also including things like automatic scripting out of dependencies as well. And in fact, that option is turned on here. We can see that there are some dependencies with some objects, and we're going to capture that into our script. So in the first step, we're going to alter our customers table to add our Facebook column. And then we're also going to create our new procedure down here as well that we've created. And further down, any dependencies, as I said, we'll script those out within the end of the migration here. And this is going to be our migration 004. So continuing that sequential order that's going to give us structure and control over our deployments moving forwards. In addition, we have U004 to be created. Now, this is already coming up with a potential data loss because in here, we are going to both be dropping our new procedure and then also doing an alter statement to drop our Facebook column. So we're always going to warn you where possible on any issues that may be faced by actually using any destructive commands. Now, these scripts are entirely editable. So although this is a framework, if you wish to make any alterations on how the deployment's being made, maybe insert a bit of data alongside here that you hadn't wanted to script in the project, anything that you wish to do, you can alter these here. So you are still in complete control of how your database is changed, how it is impacted, but we're just giving you that framework to do some of the heavy lifting to begin with. Once I'm sure of these changes, I can save these scripts in, and they're going to go alongside my schema model update, my V4, and my U4 scripts as well. Now, at this stage, likely we're going to want to commit these into version control. So I can come over here, just enable our version control tab. Now, the great thing is here, we're using underlying Git functionality to support this workflow. So it's already telling me here that I have 6 changes or 6 files to commit new versions of. Now, a couple of these are just some updates to our object. So we have that customers update, we have our new stored procedure, and then we also have our version script and our undo script. And along with this, we've just made some modifications previously to some of our YAML pipeline and settings. So I can select all of these or individually select just one of these if I want to push them through. And we can put in a comment. So there we go. I can commit these into version control, and I can actually select the branch I want to work with up here. So I can not only pivot to an existing branch, but I could also add a new branch if I wanted at this step. So really unlocking some wider functionality in the workflow. From here, I can push my changes up, and these are now centrally held. Now, the great thing is here, because we're using that underlying Git functionality, not only can we push, but we can pull. So if we are using that dedicated model and we are leveraging, say, branching, if one of my colleagues had decided to push some changes through, I can then pull these down to my environment, and I can merely come back to that schema model workflow and swap over to the apply to database section. And I can bring their project changes into my workflow and then maybe expand on those for next steps. But before we leave the UI of Flyway Desktop, I just want to touch on exactly what we can do with here in way of deployments. So not only can we use this to capture development changes and script out those migrations and rollbacks, but we can also deploy within the UI as well. So if you're currently on a manual process or you're just getting to grips with Flyway as a new solution, this is a great way to actually control that workflow. So I've set up my environments in here, so I could select my test environment. And what this is going to do is take a look at that test environment, and we'll come onto this a little bit further on as well, and look at all of our potential scripts. So we've got our baseline script, our previously deployed migrations 2 and 3, and we can see that these have been successfully deployed, and our new migration that is actually pending here as well. So what this allows us to do is, if we wish to, migrate this step from within the UI. We could actually deploy this script to our test environment, leveraging the Flyway functionality. We can also expand on this by bringing in advanced configuration. So I can add a parameter in here. For example, if we have multiple scripts to deploy, the cherry pick functionality, it allows me to enter a script number that maybe isn't the next sequential one that we want to go to. So I could enter, if we had, say, 10 scripts, I could enter just script 8 and deploy that out of sequence against the environment if that was a change we needed to prioritize through. And everything we do here can also be brought to the pipeline stage. But this is just a way in which Flyway can interact, and you can actually use the functionality in the UI to both capture your development workflow, but also enhance that deployment functionality. In addition, let me just come back from here, we have a number of other commands. So we can actually leverage those rollback scripts here as well. We can run reports from in here using our check functionality, and we'll look at these in the pipeline. But these can do things like give us outputs based around what pending changes we have to come, what drift that we're looking at in a database environment. So do we have any changes in there that we haven't actually moved through the pipeline? We can do code analysis on our changes and put controls in place. And we can also do a dry run script. So if we had, say, those number of pending scripts I mentioned, we can actually get a single output that's going to concatenate together all of those into one file for a really easy review process. But what we're going to look at today is deploying these changes through the pipeline rather than the UI. So for the demonstration today, I've got Azure DevOps. Now, Flyway is incredibly flexible. It comes with a CLI functionality, and this means we can really integrate across any CI/CD solution of choice that you have. So in here, let's look at our repository. We have our existing project structure, so our schema model with our object definitions, and we have all of our change scripts in here. Now, I'm in the dev branch at the moment, and we can see that we've got this here. Now, I want to bring this into my release branch because that's where we're going to be actually deploying from. So I'm going to create my pull request. Now, the reason I wanted to do this way was to show you the level of visibility that Flyway gives you when reviewing a change. Because we're capturing both the state-based object evolution and the migrations workflow, for reviewing any pending change, we can not only see how those changes are about to be made, but we can see what the change is as well. So in the schema model here, I get this complete object overview. You can see the same for my new procedure. And as mentioned, I can review how that change is about to be made. So this really does give us this sort of full control and visibility over these changes. So for now, what I'm just going to do is I'm just going to merge these in and create my pull request for here. So let's just complete this. And once this is in place, our pipeline is set to automatically trigger from a new change. But again, this can be manually controlled in line with whatever CI/CD solution you choose to use. So when I come into my pipelines, I've actually got 4 pipelines stood up that I can leverage. So our standard West Wind pipeline, and this is all built off of YAML templates, which makes it ultimately very scalable across the infrastructure that we have. And we can just plug in various variable groups to allow this to happen. But our West Wind pipeline is going to take us forwards with all pending changes that have been approved and checked into that release branch. If we wanted to use that cherry pick functionality that I mentioned, the first thing that we're going to be greeted with when we try and run this pipeline is it's just going to ask us for what numbers we want to deploy. Now, this doesn't have to be a single script. This can be a multiple number of scripts, but also in here, we can structure the sequence and the order in which these are going to be deployed just by specifying that within a comma separated list here. Undo pipeline works in a very similar way. That allows us to leverage one or multiple undo scripts going forwards. And then we have a hotfix pipeline that you may choose to have for prioritizing maybe just a few key testing steps ahead of a release in case of emergency and wanting to push a change through the pipeline. However, if we had something really urgent, we could even circumvent this by deploying via the UI to get that change into our later stage environments. And Flyway would still understand this and accommodate it in future runs of the pipeline as well. But for today, we're just going to look at this forward migrations workflow. And when we come in here, we've got 3 steps that we're going to run. So we're running a build step, a testing step to our test environment, and then ultimately the production deployment. And when we look at this, we can do a number of great things leveraging Flyway as part of our pipeline process. So what we're going to do is we're going to validate that all of our migration scripts deploy in our build environment. This is, again, a fully optional step. But this is just going to allow us to come in and actually look at what is involved with all of those deployments, make sure everything compiles correctly. We can then also leverage our undo scripts and run those, just again to confirm that this is a deployable in case of emergency later and we actually need to use this in anger. From here, we can move on to our testing deployments. And again, manual approval gates can be inserted wherever you wish for this process. And we're going to create our first set of reports. So those drift and change reports that we looked at. But what I really want to talk about here is looking at our deployment. So we're currently, there we go, doing our deployment to test. And when we approach our deployments, what we're actually going to see is that script 4 at the beginning here, just using that info output that we can through Flyway, was showing us pending. Now, Flyway is going to do a very clever thing here because on any environment that Flyway is interacting with, the first thing it's going to do on the first interaction is create us a Flyway schema history table. And this is going to be individual to the environment that we're speaking about. And in here, this is how Flyway tracks and references all of the deployments that we're making. So we can see here, we've now just captured our script 4 being deployed. And we're going to be able to see not only the sequence of deployments that have occurred, we're going to be able to see the user that was passed to Flyway to enable this. We're going to be able to see an audit stamp time and date of when this was executed. And crucially, we're also going to log the checksum value of that script. Now, as an optional step with Flyway, every time we approach a deployment, we can actually double check this checksum value against the scripts in our repository, just to make sure that they are still the scripts that we deployed previously, ensuring that those same changes are consistently being applied against each environment, and no one's editing a script that is then going to say be deployed to a future environment after the fact in a different version. And by using this schema history table, effectively sort of becoming the brain of Flyway, what this enables us to do is identify that script 4 was pending. We've then passed the migrate command without any additional parameters. So that means all pending changes are to be deployed. And it successfully then executes script 4, captures that time and date stamp, inserts the checksum into the schema history table, and rolls that change forwards. Now from here, what we've got is we've chosen to move straight to production. At this point, we've halted. We've got a manual review step in here that's just asking us to review the changes prior to deployment. And when we want to look at those changes, we want maximum visibility. So when we come over to our pipeline side, let's just come back in here. What we can see within this run is we've actually published 2 artifacts alongside it. So we've run this step for both our testing environment and our production environment. But on production, we've halted the process to allow us to see this. Now, alongside these controls, we can have additional pipeline rules coming in here that enable us to prevent certain actions, flag up anything that we really want to see here. Let's just open up this report. And what we've got in here is a number of different reports that we can look at. So we could be looking at any code analysis that we're running. We could have that dry run report concatenating together all of our changes. But the ones I want to focus on today are our change report. So any object that is being added, removed, or modified as part of this workflow. And we can see these are being called out here. So we're flagging up the modification to our customers table, and we're highlighting what that modification is. And we're also identifying that we're about to add our brand new stored procedure in here as well. Now, this is not only great for code review, but also after the fact. If you're looking at audit compliance, if you're looking at visibility around your pipeline, even if you're looking at maybe issue resolution, all of this creates something really valuable for us to be able to come back to and then be able to reference as part of those workflows. The other part is our drift report. So fortunately, we're not seeing any database drift in this step, but this is really identifying, has someone come into, in this case, production and made a modification to production that isn't in part of the Flyway project, because we're looking at comparing our target database against all of the stages in those migration scripts that we're about to implement. Now, if we'd found an added, removed, or modified object in here, this would be called out in the same way that the change report does, giving us this breakdown here. This way, if we're looking at making a confident production deployment because everything has, say, worked great in our testing environment, but when we come to production, we can just be sure that that structure is still the same structure that we were looking at in test, ensuring that those changes we can be confident are going to be successful. Now, if this is the case, we can simply move back to our pipeline and we can look to kick off our next step in here by coming in, reviewing here, adding any additional comments, and then moving to that production level deployment. And this process not only creates visibility for all, it creates a complete traceable process. We can come back into at any point because of the way that we're tracking our objects, and we can look at anything, in this case, our customers table that we've just modified. We can see the full history of changes. We can jump into these at any point and see exactly what was included in that change that we were seeing. We can see how those changes have evolved with our migration scripts, and we can have those additional pipeline controls. So really, this is how Flyway brings structure, security, and confidence into our really scalable, really repeatable deployment processes, where even if you have more than one database platform in play, you can still bring this across the board. So hopefully this has given you a bit of an insight into the benefit that Flyway can bring, but obviously we'd love to discuss this further, and any questions, please do let us know. Thank you.